November 1943. Above the desolate volcanic sands of Iwo Jima, a lone reconnaissance Zero, flown by Warrant Officer Takeo Tanamizu of the 241st Kokutai, banked sharply, its canopy glinting under the harsh Pacific sun. He was a veteran, hardened by years of combat, and yet a chill traced its way down his spine. Below him, two American fighters, their powerful engines rumbling like distant thunder, were closing fast. These were not the sluggish wildcats he remembered from Guadalcanal. These machines moved with an unsettling new purpose, their blunt noses hinting at an uncompromising solidity. Tanamizu pushed his Zero to its limits, but the pursuers were relentless, their speed and climb rate defying the familiar limitations of American aircraft. He barely escaped, returning to base with a frantic report. The enemy, he warned, had unleashed something new, something far more formidable than anything they had faced before. But the high command, still confident in the Zero's supremacy, would initially dismiss his alarm, believing it to be an exaggeration of a tired pilot. For years, the Imperial Japanese Navy had held an almost religious conviction in the superiority of their pilots and aircraft. The Mitsubishi A6M Zero, a marvel of lightweight design and incredible maneuverability, had carved a bloody swathe through Allied air forces in the opening months of the war. Propaganda films broadcast nationwide depicted clumsy American planes falling easily before the nimble Zero, piloted by men imbued with the spirit of Bushido. Even high-ranking officers like Commander Minoru Genda, architect of the Pearl Harbor attack, spoke of American aircraft with a certain disdain, believing their emphasis on heavy armor and armament sacrificed agility, a fatal flaw in the brutal ballet of aerial combat. Japanese intelligence reports, often filtered through this same lens of national pride, routinely underestimated the American capacity for innovation and adaptation. They clung to the notion that American pilots, coddled and inexperienced, would always be outmatched by the battle-hardened veterans of the IJN. They believed the Wildcat was merely a stopgap, easily overcome. But the reports circulating from the South Pacific, whispers of a new, faster Grumman fighter, were beginning to paint a different, unsettling picture. By late 1943, these whispers began to coalesce into a chilling reality. The F6F Hellcat, a formidable new fighter from the Grumman workshops, started appearing in increasing numbers over the Solomon Islands and the Marshalls. Initially, Japanese pilots often mistook it for the familiar F4F Wildcat, given their similar silhouettes. However, these new Wildcats possessed an unnerving turn of speed and a climb rate that defied conventional American design philosophy. In skirmishes around Rabaul and over the Gilberts, Zero pilots accustomed to dictating the terms of engagement found themselves on the defensive, unable to shake the tenacious new enemy. Japanese after-action reports, collected by the 201st Air Group, for example, began to note a significant increase in the performance parameters of enemy fighters. They documented powerful engines, excellent speed at all altitudes, and, critically, heavy armament. Many pilots simply wrote off their encounters as bad luck or isolated incidents, unwilling to accept that their beloved Zero, still the envy of the world, could be outmatched. But the mounting losses, particularly in the skies above Tarawa, were becoming undeniable, signaling a shift in the aerial balance of power that would soon become catastrophic. The true horrifying awakening for many Japanese pilots came in June 1944, during the Battle of the Philippine Sea, an engagement that would forever be known to American airmen as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. The Imperial Japanese Navy had gambled everything, launching a massive coordinated attack with their remaining carrier air groups. Their pilots, many of them fresh from training, were told they would face an enemy weary from prolonged combat, flying aircraft still inferior to the Zero. Orders from Vice Admiral Kakuji Kakuta emphasized the numerical superiority of their attack waves and the spirit of certain victory. What they encountered, however, was a meticulously orchestrated American defense, spearheaded by hundreds of Hellcats. Lieutenant Commander Masao Iizuka, a veteran pilot who survived the ordeal, later recounted the sheer overwhelming numbers. "They came at us like a wall," he stated, "far too many to count, and they were all fast, very fast." The Hellcats, guided by superior radar and directed by highly trained flight controllers, tore through the Japanese formations with brutal efficiency. The Hellcat's Pratt & Whitney double Wasp engine, producing 2,000 horsepower, gave it a significant speed advantage, especially in a dive, and its 650 caliber machine guns delivered a devastating punch. Japanese pilots found their Zeros, still capable in a slow turn, outclassed in every other respect. They couldn't climb with the Hellcat, couldn't dive away from it, and couldn't absorb the punishment it dished out. One pilot, barely escaping, described the enemy as angels of death descending from above. The psychological impact was profound. Survivors returned to their carriers with tales of utter slaughter, of their comrades simply vanishing in plumes of smoke and fire. The official war diary of Carrier Division 1 recorded a devastating loss of 315 aircraft and 215 pilots in a single day, a casualty rate that left the Japanese carrier air arm crippled beyond recovery. The illusion of Japanese air superiority had not merely been shattered, it had been pulverized into dust by the relentless power of the F6F. Following the Marianas disaster, the tone of Japanese internal communications shifted dramatically. The initial contempt had curdled into a bitter respect, and then, for many, outright fear. Intelligence summaries now spoke of the Hellcat with grudging admiration, acknowledging its rugged construction, powerful engine, and formidable armament. Pilot testimonies were no longer dismissed. Warrant Officer Takeo Tanamizu, whose early warning had been ignored, saw his fears realized on a horrific scale. Veterans like Saburo Sakai, who had survived countless dogfights, later reflected on the stark reality of the Hellcat's arrival. He observed that American pilots, once considered inferior, were now often better trained, fighting in a machine designed for pure combat efficiency, not acrobatic flair. The Hellcat was the best fighter in the world at that time, Sakai conceded, not because of its maneuverability, but because of its overall superiority and the training of its pilots. The psychological toll was immense. Japanese fighter pilots, once confident, now often took to the skies with a sense of dread. Their tactics evolved from aggressive engagement to desperate evasion. The Hellcat wasn't just a superior aircraft, it was a symbol of America's industrial might, its seemingly endless production lines churning out thousands of these formidable machines. It represented a strategic disadvantage the Imperial Japanese Navy could never overcome. Even as new, faster Japanese fighters like the Raiden and Shiden were introduced, they came too late and in too few numbers to stem the tide. The Hellcat had become a harbinger of doom, its very presence in the sky signaling a losing battle. The arc from dismissal to terror was complete, etched into the hearts of every Japanese pilot who faced the blunt, powerful silhouette of the F6F. By the war's end, the F6F Hellcat had claimed more aerial victories than any other Allied naval aircraft, boasting a kill-to-loss ratio of 19.1 against Japanese aircraft. It had been the instrument by which American naval air power asserted its undisputed dominance, a dominance forged in the crucible of countless dogfights across the Pacific. For the Japanese pilots who survived, the Hellcat remained an indelible memory, not merely a machine, but the embodiment of an overwhelming, relentless foe. It was the aircraft that had turned the tide, shattered their illusions, and fundamentally changed the way they viewed aerial combat. It was the plane they had learned, through bitter experience and crushing defeat, to truly fear, a fear that would haunt the skies of the Pacific until the very end.